Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to another tank review. This time we are looking at the German Tier 7 heavy tank, the Porsche Tiger or Tiger P. Quickly, historically, this thing was a competitor to the Henschel design for what would become the Tiger tank. This was obviously made by the Porsche company, hence Tiger P or Porsche Tiger. And ultimately, well, I mean, how was this different to the Henschel design? They were both designed to have the same gun, the L56 88mm gun. And if you compared the two tanks directly, the things that Porsche did different. One, they put the turret at the front rather than the middle of the tank. Two, they had a thicker frontal plate on the hull, whereas the Tiger's armour on the hull was around about 100mm thick. A lot of the front of the Porsche Tiger was 200mm thick, or up to 200mm thick, I should say. And three, Porsche went for a fancy electric transmission. Now, the problem with this was that Germany's position in the Second World War meant that copper and some other metals that they were acquiring weren't in particularly great quality. And so the engine and the transmission for this tank weren't really something that the Germans were capable of actually manufacturing for material-related reasons, or rather, they were not capable of manufacturing to a high standard. Long story short, the Tiger P suffered from a very maintenance-intensive transmission system, let's put it that way. This thing used to take an awful lot of work, and so the advantages it offered over the Henschel design, the thicker armour, kind of wasn't really necessary. I mean, the 100mm was perfectly sufficient to bounce most of the things the Allies would throw at them anyway. And the disadvantages, i.e. the transmission that required an awful lot of work, were quite significant. So the Henschel design was the winner, and the Porsche design lost out. The hull of the Porsche tank, I mean the turret was pretty much the same, and so that was just put on the Tiger, but the hull of the machine was used for what would become known as the Elephant or Ferdinand tank destroyer. So there is that. What we get in game, well, this thing is at tier 7, and if you're making your way up this particular German heavy tank line, this will be the first heavy tank that you actually come across. If we have a quick look at the tech tree, here we are. There are a couple of different ways of getting to this machine. Panzer 35T, Panzer 38T, Panzer 38NA, and then leading up to the Panzer 4H is one route. Alternatively, Panzer 2, Panzer 3E, Panzer 4A, Panzer 4D, and then Panzer 4H. The latter route does require an extra step, as there's this side step at tier 3 from the Panzer 3E to the Panzer 4A. But it's only a low tier machine. I mean, that's not going to cost a vast amount of experience or credits. So you can take either option to get to the Panzer 4H. Once you've got to the Panzer 4H, you have a reasonably decent tier 5 medium tank, which opens up a couple of different branches in the German tech tree. You then get to the VK3001P, which has improved a lot since I played through that thing. When I played the tank, it was horrible. But then ultimately you get to the Tiger P. Now, what's this like when you actually get to this tank? Well, there's good news and bad news, I guess. So, if you have a look at the various guns that need to be unlocked and the various modules that need to be unlocked, you can see that all of these guns can be fitted without the top turret. This is good. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they can be fitted without upgrading the suspension, of course, but they can be fitted without the top turret. The 88mm gun here, obviously the stock gun you'll already have, it's the stock gun. This 88mm gun, if you've got any sense, you'll have unlocked on the VK. And this 105mm derp gun you'll have unlocked on the tier 5 Panzer 4H. I do not recommend using the derp, but which one out of the L70 and the L56, the 75 and the 88mm guns you want to use to grind with, it's kind of up to you. Since they buffed the penetration on the L56 88mm, I think it's kind of a bit more of a no-brainer. I would probably recommend the 88mm gun, but by all means try both out and see which you prefer. Ultimately, you do want to get this top L71 88mm gun. It does kind of make the tank. You do want it, and I would prioritise it. The turret, save till last. It's good to have, but you don't need it for the rest of the tank to work. Engine-wise, again, you do want to actually get that top engine. This tank can be rather on the sluggish side, so I do recommend getting that top engine. And there are 4 different tanks you can unlock from the Tiger P. However, worth noting that any tank that this is not a direct line to will be more expensive to unlock. So let me show you what I mean. The VK4502A is 90,000 experience. The VK101P is 101,000 experience. Fine. The Ferdinand is 150,000 experience, and the Tiger 1 is 25,000 experience. I would recommend unlocking the Ferdinand from the Jagdpanther if you intend to go that line. But by all means unlock the heavy tanks if you wish, and you could even unlock the Tiger if you have not already done so. The grind on this tank is... you really want that top gun, let's put it that way. You really want that top gun. So, what is it, once you have this tank fully upgraded, that you are left with? Let's have a look at a few different aspects for this tank. Kick things off with 1,450 hit points. It's decidedly above average for a Tier 7 heavy tank. It's not the highest, but it is above average. In terms of armour, we're going to look more at this in a bit, but on paper, 200mm on the front of the hull, 80 on the sides, 80 on the rear, and on the turret, 180, 80. This looks like a flat-up upgrade over the Tiger 1. As I say, we'll look at that more later, because this is where paper and reality don't always tie up, I'm afraid. We're going to look at the firepower and the gun in a moment, so we're not going to dwell on that too much right now. Mobility-wise, this is a heavy tank at the end of the day, and not a particularly mobile one. A 670 horsepower engine on a 65-ton tank. Well, I mean, it depends exactly what loadout you have, of course, but you end up with a specific power just a shade over 10 horsepower per ton, which is not amazing. And this tank does feel rather sluggish. Despite the respectable top speed of 35 kilometers an hour, you're going to struggle to get up to that most of the time. Reverse speed of 12, yeah, nothing to write home about. Traverse speed, also nothing to really get excited about. Concealment, who cares? It's a heavy tank at the end of the day. Spotting, with the top turret you do get a 380 meter view range, which is reasonably respectable. And you have a pretty pimpin' radio with a 710 meter view range, so no complaints there. Let's have a quick look at the guns then. So you've got these 3 guns. I wouldn't use the howitzer. So you've got these 2 guns to do your grinding with. I'd probably recommend the 88mm gun, but once you've got it unlocked, you then have the L71. This is the same gun that you find on the Tiger 1. Sort of. Okay, it is the same gun, but this is a worse version of that gun. So you have the same 203mm of average penetration and 240 alpha damage, assuming you're firing AP, of course. You have the same APCR penetration, that's your premium round, a rather underwhelming 237, given that your regular penetration, and you have the same 295 alpha and 44 pen with your HE rounds. The HE rounds are not brilliant, but they can be useful here or there. 0.34 dispersion at 100 meters is perfectly good. The 2.9 second aim time is okay. I mean, it gets the job done. Combine that with the soft stats on this gun and it can be a little bit annoying. You would quite like it to hit for slightly more given the amount of time that you spend aiming. And the alpha damage doesn't feel like a massive upgrade over the tier 6, and that's because it's not a massive upgrade over the tier 6, 220 to 240 for a whole tier higher. But the gun gets the job done. The bit where it really falls down in comparison to the Tiger 1 is the rate of fire. This does not have the rate of fire of the other German heavy tank. So you're not going to be pumping out the shots as quickly. This thing does not do the damage as fast as the other Tiger. How does the gun compare across the board? Well, it's alright. It's, as I say, it's not as good as the other Tiger. What else have we got? It's probably better than the Black Prince's gun. It doesn't have quite the same punch as the T29's, but it is more accurate. I prefer it to the AMX's 90mm gun. But it's you know, it gets the job done, it's fine. Not amazing, but definitely not terrible. So that is the firepower of the machine. What about things like equipment and crew skills? Well, I've got a rammer and vents to go with this thing. You can't take a vertical stabilizer. Your last equipment choice is kind of up to you. 380 base view range means that you could definitely try and invest in coated optics. Bump the view range up that little bit. I use binos instead. Whether you want to do that or not is kind of up to you. I'd probably recommend optics, to be honest, with 380 meter base view range, but I'll leave that up to you, of course. Ammunition wise, 203 penetration is very decent for tier 7, so you shouldn't have to pack a huge amount of APCR. Then again, this tank does get a pretty respectable ammunition loadout, so I would recommend taking more than the 5 rounds of APCR that I have here, especially as tanks have been up-armoured of late. So you've got things like at tier 8 the VK 101p, you've got the Defender. I mean, if you're facing a Defender in this thing, basically you have to load APCR and go through his lower front plate. That's what you have to do. So, unless you can get him in the side or the rear. So I would take more than the 5 I've got here, but yeah, that's again, it's your choice. Consumables, I have your standard set of consumables. I don't really think there's any particular consumable you definitely want to take on this tank. Although bearing in mind the whole rear of this thing is engine and fuel and transmission and all that unpleasant stuff, I think I would definitely recommend keeping the fire extinguisher. Ammo rack, just to say, is below the turret in the hull here. Everything else is pretty much where you would expect. The commander is where there's a commander's hatch, and so on and so forth. Crew skills. This is a heavy tank at the end of the day. Now, I have preventative maintenance on my driver. That is a legacy from way back in the dawny mists of time when a lot of German tanks had frontal transmissions in the game. And so I used to take preventative maintenance to try and reduce the chances of them catching fire. That's not really the case anymore, so I'd probably ditch preventative maintenance, if I'm going to be honest, in favour of something else. Repairs is your friend, of course. Sixth Sense, safe stowage, standard good stuff. You can see I'm training up brothers in arms here now. What, of course, you could do if you retrain for gold, I don't, but if you do, you could train up repairs across the board and then retrain your commander to Sixth Sense, train up repairs again, retrain your loader to safe stowage, train up repairs again, rinse and repeat. If you're not retraining for gold and you're retraining for credits, then you may not want to do that, as you lose some experience when you do your retraining for credits. With all that said and done, I think I've covered the main points of this tank in the garage, so we're just going to have a quick look at the armour profile and then get into some gameplay. One thing I didn't mention in the garage, this thing gets a rather mediocre 6 degrees of gun depression around the front and sides, goes down to 3 over the rear of the tank. Not bad enough to be completely terrible, but certainly not good. Now let's have a look at the thing's armour. It claimed 80mm on the side and the rear of the hull. That claim is pretty true. We've then got 80mm on the rear of the turret and 80mm on the side of the turret, so it's really just the front we have to worry about. Let's start off with that turret. So, well, you've basically got a 100mm turret with a gun mantlet over the front but with some holes in it. Long story short, this turret is unreliable. Even assuming they hit your gun mantlet, there are plenty of places where people can penetrate even lower tier tanks. Hitting these turret cheeks, however, will basically be an auto bounce angle, so I wouldn't recommend that. But have you noticed yet the dirty great commander's hatch? You can't really hide this all with your gun depression. This thing makes this turret trash. Combine that with a turret roof that is only 25mm thick, and that means any gun that is greater in caliber than 75mm will completely overmatch this turret roof and go straight through. This turret is not particularly good in the grand scheme of things. What about the hull, that vaunted 200mm of armour? Well, there's 200mm of armour, there's 200mm of armour, however, there is 80mm, there is 80mm, and there is 80mm. And so you only actually need about 120mm of penetration to go through the front of this hull, really. And ditto for the commander's hatch. In fact, if you're willing to shoot the upper bit of the commander's cupola, you only need, what, 55mm of penetration. So the front of this thing, it's a combination of sturdy armour and holes. It's a bit like Swiss cheese. But enough of all this jazz, let's go and look at some gameplay. Match number 1 then, and we are top tier for this one here on Karelia? Karelia, fantastic. It's an assault game, and we are on the defending team. We are one of 3 tier 7s on our team, myself, a Leo, and a GW Panther. and we are facing off against the enemy's Tiger 1, so kind of pseudo mirror match, T-34-1 and GW Panther. Sense of deja vu there. There are of course going to be a good wedge of tier 5s to shoot at, as this is the relatively new, I think it was as of patch 9.18, 357 matchmaking spread. Of course, as of that matchmaker, you are going to be seeing matches like this relatively rarely, because if you've got that tier spread, that means most of your matches are going to be middle or bottom tier rather than top tier as we have here. Nonetheless, let's show you what this thing can do when it's in its element. Now, as ever, this replay is going to be none too shabby. It's going to be showing you hopefully some of what the tank can do, but it's not going to be an ace tanker game or anything like that. Because I think showing ace tankers in tank reviews skews people's expectations, and I don't think that's a particularly good idea. So, here we are. Coming over to this corner up here in A9 to duke it out. When you're top tier, your armour is fairly respectable, and, you know, as with most top tier heavy tanks, you can very much bully the smaller tanks that you come across. So around here, for example, we've got a Panzer T25. If I'd wanted to bother aiming that shot, I could have tried to track him in place, but I didn't want to. I wanted to just get the damage in, because the aiming stats on this gun aren't fantastic. There's our second bounce, and we've also got a Stutzwang 74. Third bounce, and we kill the Panzer. I have to be careful here, because there is actually a BDR to my left-hand side. My gun depression is not fantastic, as you can see there, 6 degrees, yeah. There's also a KV-1 over to my left-hand side, so there's quite a lot of bad guys over here. We do have to be a little bit careful. That Stutzwang is just coming up, so we put a shell into his face, and 240 alpha damage. Whilst it isn't absolutely fantastic, when you are top tier, it certainly feels meaty enough to make people a little bit afraid of you. Take one penetration there as we're coming around the corner. Yep, right through these shoulder pieces. These are weak spots, as noted in the garage, and so if you're angling your tank and coming around a corner, you do have to expect that people are going to penetrate you there. But I wanted to be able to pick up the kill on that Stutzwang, so I traded a little bit of damage for that kill. Now having a look at the BDR and the KV-1. BDR puts a shot into our turret by the look of it, and there you can see, you know, that stretch of armour at the top of the turret that I said was 25mm thick, and any gun that was larger than a 75mm gun would completely overmatch it. BDR has a 90mm gun, KV-1 has an 85mm gun, so they can both overmatch it, despite the fact that they're tier 5. So he penetrated me there. Conversely, I was able to put a shot straight through the front of the KV-1's turret. So this is giving you a pretty good idea of what the armour on this tank is like. There we go, we managed to pick out the cupola on the BDR G1B and put a shot into him. The armour on this tank is not fantastic. There's another penetration, and oh, would you credit it, it's exactly the same job. Now, this is the thing. You've got a giant commander's cupola, and so people aim for it. But they've got a lot of leeway. They can penetrate you by hitting the cupola, but if they miss the cupola and go low, they can go straight through that angled piece of your roof that an awful lot of guns you're going to meet can, as I mentioned, completely overmatch. So that can be frustrating, but you know, they're only tier 5, so even a KV-1, 203mm of penetration is enough just to go straight through the front of his turret. Scoreline is 4-4. The enemy Tiger 1, my opposite number, has got himself into a rather dicey situation and is actually dead. And at this point, I'm kind of tossing up my options here, but looking at the minimap, I want to make sure that our base is secure, so I'm just going to speed this along a little bit. So I decide to trundle back towards base. Now, well, here we go. This is normal speed. We are doing 35 kilometers an hour, which is our speed limit, but we're doing it because we're going downhill. So once we've stopped going downhill, let's see what actually happens to our speed. We're now, well, kind of sort of travelling on the flat-ish. It's not a road, but it's not too bumpy, and we're doing 25 kilometers an hour, 25 to 30. So your top speed limit really is for those times when you're going downhill. You can't expect to be doing it too often when that's not the case. Swinging ourselves around, we don't really want to go round on a direct route towards those tanks over there, because that exposes our flank to shots from any tanks the enemies might have up at G7 on that hill. Instead, we decide to take a longer route round, and we are met with the T-34-100 from the enemy team, who we promptly execute, and that puts us on a nice round 1600 damage. With 3 kills. So we've already had a pretty decent roll in this game. We've done more damage than we have hit points, and we've picked up 3 kills to boot. Interestingly, if we just rewind the clock a moment, looking at the shots we've taken, you'll notice that the BDR G1B was firing APCR ammunition. Now, it's interesting that he was doing that against our tank, because where he penetrated, he did not need to be doing that. Aiming at the commander's hatch doesn't need APCR for that either. The only real way in which APCR would make a difference is if he were trying to put shots straight through the front of our turret, and then it would increase his chances to penetrate. But everywhere else on the tank, either he wouldn't penetrate even with APCR, or he would penetrate even without APCR. So he wants to throw away his credits, that's entirely up to him. We've got a Stritzwang M42, an OI, an SU-8 and a GW Panther left at this point. Hopefully this game should be in the bag, just speeding it up towards the end. But you can see even here, going uphill, we're down to sort of 17 kilometers an hour. And 10, 9, 10. But here are the bad guys. Churchill gun carrier is with me. I wonder how long he's going to last. He puts a shot into the SU-8. We finish off the SU-8. GW Panther nukes at our Churchill, but our GW Panther nukes their GW Panther. And now I'm just coming around the corner to deal with the Stritzwang, whilst being a little bit careful about that OI. We don't really want to take a shot from him in the flank, because the side armour is pretty poo. So I decide to turn my front to the OI, and accept that I might take the odd shot in the side from the Stritzwang there. But I do not want to take a penetrating hit from that OI and lose potentially all of the rest of my health. Take another shot from that Stritzwang, put another one into the OI, and with the OI backing off, we can now turn around to kind of deal with that Stritzwang. OI is a 1-shot, Stritzwang is a 2-shot, and now he's a 1-shot. GW Panther finishes off that little medium tank. OI kills the Griller, which means the OI is reloading. So he's not going to be able to kill me, as the only way he'd be able to finish me off is either if he gets ridiculously lucky with an ammo rack or something, or if he were using the big gun. That would still be reloading, and that is actually the game done and dusted. So let's check out the results for this one. So that match was enough for First Class Mastery, Fighter, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Hand of God and High Caliber. Not a bad result, all things considered. Finished at the top of our team, 2,378 damage done, 4 kills, 1,108 base experience, and of course we picked up that High Caliber medal. 13 shots fired, 13 hits, 13 penetrations for that damage count. We were at pretty close range. A lot of our shots weren't fully aimed, but it didn't really matter too much because we were at pretty close range. 9 hits received, 5 penetrated, 4 did not. Damage blocked by our armour, 370. Now, this is where I would really like to point out that we bounced fewer than half the shots that were fired at us, even though we were top tier, and a lot of the tanks that were shooting at us were tier 5. So let's just think about who was able to penetrate us. The BDR and the KV-1 could overmatch our roof. And then at the end there was a Stritzwang who was able to put shots into our side because it was a choice between him or the OI. So think to yourself how much value the armour actually has. That was when we were top tier, of course. 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 8 damaged, 4 destroyed, 728 assistance damage, and we made a 20,000 credit profit with a standard account. So not too bad there in terms of profitability. So that was the best matchmaking you're going to see, which at the moment you're not going to get that too often. Now let's have a look at what's going to be a familiar sight, Tier 9. Here we are then, the unfortunately very familiar Tier 9 match. Now, I would like to point out here, this was actually the first game I played in the Tiger P after I bought it back. So please bear in mind, the crew in it is a bit, well, they've freshly been retrained, so they're not as good as they could be, put it that way. And also bear in mind, I haven't played the tank in a long time. So, having a look at both teams, what we've got. Both teams have a top tier artillery, we can easily penetrate that. Both teams have a top tier light tank, we can penetrate a 1390. Both teams have a top tier tank destroyer, so there aren't actually any top tier heavy tanks. The Jagdtiger on the enemy team is heavily armoured, don't get me wrong, but with our armour piercing rounds we can go through his lower front plate. The tanks that are actually going to potentially give us the most problems penetrating are, well, there is that Jagdtiger, the VK101P, the IS-6, and the Defender. The IS-3 we should be okay going through his pike nose. And the Super Pershing, we have to aim for weak spots. Now, this gun is capable of aiming for weak spots, and I'm going to play this, well, you'll see what I mean in just a sec. I'm perhaps going to take the odd risk or two. I managed to spot a Leo out, though. There's that 380 metre base view range for you. So, a little bit of assistance damage on the Leo just to start things off. But you can see the tank is not the fastest. It's not super slow, but it is not one of the most mobile heavy tanks in the world. So we're getting into cover. Sorry, we're on cliffs. A cliff, in case no one had noticed. We're getting into the cover of this hill so that we don't have that 212A take a massive dump on our heads. And we're actually just going to see if we can spot anything around this corner. Now, this is a little bit on the risky side. The enemy team have quite a lot of heavy tanks, and a good number of them are bigger and scarier than I am. I mean, the Defender, IS-3, IS-6, VK, the Super Pershing, they'd all, well, they should all quite easily make short work of me, and there's an IS-3. So, we found out that they're there. Let's just back off. He misses me. We put a shot in and manage to track the IS-3. He uses his repair kit. He doesn't want to be sat there. Fair enough. I can understand that. And we back off to a safer location. Someone manages to put some damage on him, possibly the artillery, not sure, and we pick up a little bit of assistance damage on the IS-3 for our trouble. Now, we are the only ones currently looking this way. We might have a little bit of support from an artillery or something, that would be nice, but other than that, we're all by ourselves. Now there is still this IS-3 round here, there we go, that shot finally penetrates, and we roll high, and the armour actually works. Can we see where that guy hit us? There we go. Shot just caught the frontal plate at a funky angle. Now it's worth pointing out the IS-3 has 225mm of penetration with AP, which is what he was firing, on average that is. And so you would expect him to go through the unangled front of a Tiger P. So that only bounced because we put a little bit of angling on it. Nonetheless, we have the reload advantage. There we go. We're not going to push it too much, but we were able to put 2 shots in him. For the 1 shot he bounced on me, and there's the artillery support. So we've got artillery looking after us, which is nice. That shot was pretty bad. The sides of an IS-3 are made of unobtainium, and that's another shot into us that bounces. Where did that one land? There we go. Frontal plate again at an angle. So this is me accepting that this guy can go through the front of our tank anyway, so there's not really much point trying to keep myself head on to him. I might as well angle and watch him bounce off our front. That is the plan anyway. Of course, it's not going to work every time. Now that takes out our gunner. As you can see, that shot straight through the front of the turret. So if you're shooting at a Tiger P, you're better off shooting the thing in the turret than you are shooting it in the hull. Most tanks are the other way around, but Tiger P has to be a bit special. IS-2, we both miss each other. And there's some more assistance damage from artillery, who has been doing his best to give me some support. So kudos to our artillery driver. Put in another shot into that IS-3, and actually we managed to play that engagement well enough that the IS-3 is dead and we're not. And now it's just an IS-2 that we know of versus me and artillery. He bounces on me once again. Now he's only got 175 penetration, so he's going to have a harder time of it, and there's a tree in the way, so I can't really see where he bounced on me, although most likely the hull. But as he's reloading, we're going to push forwards and put one into his commander's hatch after he gets damaged and tracked. Can we reload in time to finish him off? Well, we could, but our gun failed us. Accuracy just not there. And he finally puts a shot into us. None of these guys have switched to APCR, by the way. That shot goes into our commander's hatch there. Weak point, as I pointed out. We take a shot, fail miserably, and now the cavalry's arrived in the form of a Super Pershing and an OI who finishes off that IS-2. Now, my commander has been knocked out, but I haven't put him back in because my med pack is still on cooldown after seeing to my gunner. One thing you do notice with this tank, because the turret is not particularly strong, and you've got that dirty great big commander's hatch, your commander does get knocked out a lot, your gunner does get knocked out. It's a shame that it is, and the same with your loader. They all do get knocked out. Often enough, shall we say. So, coming around this corner, so far I've put a good amount of damage in. 1764 damage is more damage than I have health. Haven't fired any premium ammunition, so that's pretty nice. And generally into higher tier tanks. That was into an IS-3 most of it, with a couple of shots into an IS-2 as well. So far we've done alright. AMX 1390 just round the corner. Are we going to be able to finish this guy off? Yes we are. There goes their first tier 9. Trying to get myself into some sort of cover because I'm quite nervous about that 212 hitting us. But as it turns out, it's not the 212 I should have been concerned about. We actually take a hit there from a comet. Where did he go through? Can't actually see where he penetrated, unfortunately. And that was not with premium ammunition, that was with just good old-fashioned regular armour piercing. There's another penetration. So he's up there in the bushes somewhere, nickel and diming us to death. So I decide to hunker down behind this rock for a while. Tiger 1 and T-29 have been spotted at base. Goodness only knows what they're doing there. And then I get slapped by artillery for 530. Yay! Hurrah! So that's a little bit annoying, but there we go. I'm not going to use... Well, I can't use my med pack to get rid of that stun or anything, but even if I could, I'm not going to. Jagdtiger over there has now been spotted. I'm going to take a little bit of a risk. Is he looking my way? Not really. Trying to go for that lower front plate. Blind shot. There we go, and then we're just going to pull back. And the 212 is dead. The Tiger 1 is dead. Excellent. Just leaves Comet, Super Pershing, VK, and Jagdtiger. Taking a little bit of a risk here. Binos up. Haven't spotted that Jagdtiger. Just hoping I or someone else will spot him. Super Pershing, I wouldn't give him your side to shoot at. That's going to go badly. Ooh, somehow we got away with it. Not really sure how. There's only 3 of them left at this point. And I'm trying to just see if I can squeeze a bit more experience out of this game. At this point, Jagdtiger, well, he managed to nail the Super Pershing. My shot might have landed, I'm not sure, but he takes care of that Super Pershing. I spend probably a little too long aiming at the lower front plate. I should have backed off just here, but I'm greedy for another shot into this guy, and so I'm risking taking a hit from that Jagdtiger. I think it's going to be difficult to hit me here, and I'm far too used to playing tanks that like being hulled down. But the Tiger P isn't one of them, so I'm just blind firing this guy in the hopes of picking up some more damage at the end of the game. Jagdtiger has actually moved, but you can see at least some of my shots have hit the mark. But now that Jagdtiger is hull down, I can't fight a hull down Jagdtiger. So I'm hiding behind this rock, hoping to get some people land shots on this guy, like our artillery for example. There he is. There's one shot from someone. Oh no, that was a terrible... I was trying to pull forward to hit him in the hull, but he was more hull down than I thought he would be. Nonetheless, I managed to spot him, put a little bit of damage... Well, I don't get any damage into him, but because I spotted him, he now gets pummeled by the rest of our team. And, well, he's technically still alive at this point, but he's the only one left alive. He hasn't got much health left. And he's on 6 kills, to give credit where credit is due, but this should just be a matter of time. So on balance, it probably was worth spotting that Jagdtiger. I say that as our light tank explodes, but then artillery nails the Jagdtiger, and that is the game. So, for the last time this video, let's look at those post-game stats. That game was also in the end enough for First Class Mastery, Spotter, and Fire for Effect. We actually finished at the top of our team. 2,270 damage done, some nice blind damage done on that Jagdtiger then. 2 kills, 1,223 base experience. Now, when I played this, I was actually thinking, okay, I didn't play spectacularly well, but I got a good amount of assistance damage, I got a good amount of damage, and a lot of it against higher tier tanks. Maybe that'll be enough for the ace? Turns out 1223 XP is not enough to ace the Tiger P, or wasn't enough at the time. I imagine it can't have been that far off though. So I think this is probably about the best game you're going to see that's not an ace tanker. But bear in mind, a lot of that was achieved because I was shooting and spotting higher tier tanks. 19 shots fired, 15 hits, 10 penetrations for that damage count, most of which was from relatively close range. 9 hits received, 6 penetrated, 3 did not. So once again, that is what you can achieve with the Armour. Now, interestingly, the Armour performed better in the tier 9 match than in the tier 7 match in this video, but c'est la vie. 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 4 damage, 2 destroyed, 1,840 assistance damage, and overall we made a 21,000 credit profit, even with a standard account. Going back to the fact that we bounced more shots or more damage worth in the higher tier game, I think that's because like the IS-3 was expecting just to be able to auto-aim the little tier 7 and he'd go away, whereas the tier 5s in the previous match were actually aiming for weak points and using their brain. Anyway, there we go, that's the gameplay, so let's just go and round things off in the garage. So, what are my overall thoughts on the thing? Well, it's alright. It's not great, it's not terrible. It's kind of somewhere in between. I don't think it's really special enough to keep, and I haven't really met many people who want to keep the thing either. And it's certainly not up on the power levels of things like the T29. So, yeah, but it's also not a horrendous tank to play. It's not a complete pile of garbage. You can have some fun in it. So, there we go. My crew is going to be transferred to another machine once I've finally aced this damn thing and sold it. Yeah, not really much else to say about it. I hope you guys enjoyed that review, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, then by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao ciao.